International aid is a $130 billion industry. If it was a country, it'd have the fifth largest GDP in the world. And this money comes from donors. And so in order to survive and in order to keep working, the aid industry has to entrap and court donors in order to carry on doing the work. Now, sometimes this has led to the aid industry following a route that perhaps makes it seem to be doing good more than it actually is. And traditionally this has caused conflict when they develop solutions to problems that aren't sustainable. And sometimes we find that once the donors have been satisfied and the cameras have been turned off, these solutions stop working. They're not maintained, and they're not sustained. So, for example, 2/3 of bore wells are currently out of action because they are not maintained, and this comes pretty much basically because the aid industry is working always on looking at the next round of aid funding from its donors. So our alternative, Design Against Dependency, the focus really is on empowering local people to take ownership of the design process themselves. We've heard about the RepRap and other open source methodologies, and these are really the tools that are going to enable people to take ownership over solving their own problems. So Design Against Dependency is about developing in tandem with local people design methodologies that enable people not only to design that initial solution, but to continue designing and continue maintaining and improving the systems that they use to overcome their everyday problems. So Design Against Dependency process, like most design processes, starts with discovery. Now, discovery is really important. It's the phase in which you learn about the problem, and it's really critical that you use a very open and honest dialogue in order to get a very good handle of the kind of problem that you're dealing with. For example, is it the case that people don't have access to safe water, or is it the case that people just don't have access to safe water that tastes good? What's the reason behind the problem? In the definition phase, we look at the problem and we examine solutions to that problem. And the key here, in order to reduce dependency, is to have a methodology that really is minimally intrusive. So instead of rolling out a huge project that has a huge amount of resources and money going into it, in the first stage, in the discover phase, you look at the specific barriers to development that people have, and the define phase is all about overcoming those very specific barriers, using as much local knowledge and cultural acceptance as possible. So the develop phase is the first time that you create a prototype. That prototype it's important that it's an understandable and transparent implementation. People understand how it works. People understand how you got to that point in the development. And this enables people to see the entire process and then take that solution, be it a product or a service, apart and re-engineer it for a different situation. So once you've gone through first three stages, and that's a loop, so that might take several iterations of that loop. You can deploy a solution that is accessible and sustainable. So you've got a dialogue that's based on real data. You've got solutions that are devised in response to a true problem. They're minimally intrusive, and the implementation is transparent. And then you have a design process that is accessible to the beneficiaries, to the recipient of that process. And that design process can then be carried on long after the humanitarian has left. And the most important thing is that if you allow people to own the entire design process, rather than just designing the product or solution that you come up with for a particular problem, then you can scale that process through replication. And it doesn't matter if one person is designing a product for use in South Africa and another person is designing it for use in India. This model is completely replicable depending on the situation. Whereas, for example, if you come up with a water purifier that only has one implementation, if you come up with a product or a particular service for a locality, then that stops working the minute you take it out of that locality. So if you've got a situation where people not only own the problem they're facing, but they also own the solution to that problem, then you've got a group of people who are independent of outside assistance in terms of creating solutions to their own problems. And so what we're suggesting is, in working with the open source movement, a methodology that can seed and replicate and grow and have impact on a global scale. That's me. Thank you very much.